Hello, this is Superannuated Doodle, aka Aaron Fecka. This is my first drawing video, or not my first drawing video, but my first tutorial drawing video. And in this video, I am talking about the benefits, the techniques involved, and what you do after a gesture sketch, and how to build that gesture sketch into a completed drawing, or at least somewhat complete drawing anyway. The drawing that you are seeing me create right now is of a Iron Jawa, basically a little Jawa wearing an Iron Man suit. And one of the things you might notice in the beginning of this video is that I'm drawing a lot of loose, I'm drawing a lot of rather sketchy looking lines. Actually, in the beginning of this video, the first part where I haven't even defined shapes yet, that is the gesture sketch. The whole point of a gesture sketch is to create the posture for whatever it is that you're creating. It doesn't have to be a person, it could be a building, it could be an object, but create the basic outline or shape of your object as it exists in space, or this would be the posture of your subject as they exist in space. Some of the things you want to kind of define in your gesture sketch is movement. You want to define if they're standing still, if they're moving, if they're in balance, if they're out of balance, those kind of things. Those are all very important to define in a gesture sketch. Detail is not important. In fact, you want to avoid detail in a gesture sketch. You want to avoid drawing solid shapes. You want your lines to be fluid. You want your lines to be loose. Sketchier the better, basically. And one of the advantages, of course, in working in a digital medium such as GIMP, which is what I'm drawing in, is that you can work in layers. And so what I did in the beginning of my drawing is I did my gesture sketch. I lowered the opacity of that layer down to about 50%, and then the layer on top of that I built on was a shapes layer. So I came back in on top of the gesture sketch, and I drew in well-defined shapes. Now, all of the basic objects, or I guess all of the figures that you will probably want to draw, are built out of basic shapes. I'm talking about cylinders, spheres, cubes, wedges, those kind of things. And so the reason why that has bearing on your drawing is that when you build on top of your gesture sketch, you want to go from there and try to make your drawing take up three-dimensional space, and the best way to do that is to convert your gesture sketch into shapes. And one of the things you might notice I did was I drew cylinders for the legs, spheres for the knees, and wedge shapes for the feet. The head was kind of like a basic sphere. The forearms, right behind the hands, are cylinders. What you might notice what's special about those, though, is that they are foreshortened, meaning they're coming at you. So they're going to be drawn a little differently. And foreshortening is actually a little difficult unless you are starting with these basic shapes. If you're trying to draw an arm coming at you, unless you really know what you're doing, it's going to look a little awkward unless you think of the arm in terms of the fact that an arm is two connected cylinders. And if you think of the arm that way, it makes it a lot easier to draw in three-dimensional space. I didn't spend too much time on that layer, as you will notice. I went ahead and I started defining the clothing. I started defining the face a lot more. That was the third layer. What I did was I took the shapes layer, I dropped that down to about 50% opacity again, and then the layer on top of that is a lines layer. And then what I did was I went through and I started drawing things in a lot more detail. So I drew the Iron Man face in more detail, I drew the clothing in more detail. And this, even still, my first run through this layer, I didn't do a whole lot of detail. I still worked in, with general flowing lines, and then of course the idea is that I can always come back. I can always just erase it. I can faintly erase it, so I can still see the lines underneath, and then I can come back and I can draw more defined lines, more defined. I can make my sketch more defined. And subsequent to that, I went ahead and I created a color layer. This is what's important though to realize is before you're getting to your color layer is to look at your whole drawing, make sure your proportions are accurate, because if you have any problem with your proportions at this point, if your drawing looks flat, if the posture looks wrong, one hand's bigger than the other, that kind of thing, it's really important that you correct that now before you move on to color and details and the rest, because it's going to be a lot harder to fix after this point. So I actually moved on to colors pretty quickly because I was pretty confident with his posture, his pose. I didn't have the wrinkles in the clothing really down yet, but that's something that I just decided I was going to push off towards the end and worry about later. So I quickly went through and I colored his whole outfit. Now I'm going to talk to you about the value of working around your drawing instead of focusing on one part of your drawing. You'll notice in my video it's constantly moving all around the drawing. I'm constantly, in whatever stage I'm in, whether it's in this gesture sketch stage or if I'm in the shapes stage, I'm constantly moving around my drawing. I am constantly zooming out and zooming in because I want to get a clear idea of what the final product is going to look like, instead of focusing on one part and then saying, oh, okay, well, now I need to make everything match his eyes because I'm done with his eyes. Okay, let's move on from there. No, like the idea is to move around the sketch and evolve the whole sketch, involve the whole drawing all at once, to evolve it step by step. And even in the color layer I'm doing that. There's a point where actually I noticed that the outfit, the saturation is too high, and so I go ahead and I subdue the saturation because the saturation is too high. But it's something I wouldn't necessarily notice if I was working on just like his forearm only. If I was only working on his forearm and I wasn't moving around the drawing, I might not have noticed that. So it's very important to move around your drawing, to constantly be looking at different areas of your drawing, zoom out all the time constantly. Sometimes I actually have a view. I open up a second view of my drawing, as I'm zoomed in another window, I can see my drawing in a zoomed out perspective, and sometimes that really helps. So I hope this video has helped some people who are just starting out or who don't know what a gesture sketch is. And of course, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave those in the comments area. I probably will post another video just regarding gesture sketching and some of the other subjects I covered, but this was, I guess, kind of like a brief overview of maybe a lot of the topics that I will be talking about if I put up more drawing videos and when it is I do that. Anyways, I hope this helped, and again, this is Super Annuated Doodle. Thank you very much.